Sound matters. Be heard. Welcome to the podcast where you get exclusive behind-the-scenes tips to make your own show sound truly spectacular. This is Podtastic Audio.
Hey, what's happening and how are you doing today? Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Chris, and I am from the Chris and Christine Show podcast originally, and you can find out every single thing that you want to know about that show at chrisandchristineshow.com. And yeah, there's always a link to that show into the show notes of this episode. So here we are getting closer to the big 100. I cannot believe that Podtastic Audio, this show, I've actually made it this far, up to almost 100 episodes. Wow. I just love doing it. I have fun doing it. So Podtastic Audio is designed to help you create an amazing podcast for your audience, for your show. If you like podcasting like I like podcasting, and if you love listening to podcasts like I like listening to things too, then here we are. This show is for you. With so many tools and so many applications, plugins, tools, programs, interfaces, microphones, all kinds of fun stuff out there these days to create amazing podcast audio. It's almost kind of like, I always think like, how can somebody today make bad audio for their podcast when there's just so many different tools out there? And perhaps you don't know, or they don't know the tools that are available to use to make sure their podcast sounds amazing without having to spend amazing amounts of cash. Like, you do not have to spend thousands of dollars to get an amazing sound out of your podcast. You can do that with maybe a few $100. That's all it takes. And a lot of these programs, like I'm using Audacity, which totally is free. And then I also run the audio through Levelator, which also is free, and you can use it unlimited amount of times. These are free tools that you can pick up today to start making an amazing podcast, or make sure that your podcast sounds amazing right out of the box. And I think podcast audio, or good podcast audio, I should say, will set shows apart from the rest of the boring, lame, horrible sounding podcasts that are out there. So just today, I was kind of thinking that, you know what? I know everybody likes to say, my content is king. And yes, that is true. Content is very, very important. But almost equally as important is the way you deliver that content to your listener. So I was kind of thinking this. Imagine that you were writing a report on your home computer, and it was, I don't know, let's just say the theory of life or something. It is the most magical, greatest theory paper you've ever written in your entire life. It is gold. The content is amazing. It's great stuff. It will change the world, right? So you're super excited about this. You print a few pages of it out, you've written down, you print it out on your printer. Then you decide, you know what, Chris, I'm going to share this with you. So you print it out, you got the paper in your hand, you walk the 2 blocks from your house to my house. But it's pouring cats and dogs outside. It's raining super hard. I'm talking a total downpour rainstorm happening when you walk from your house to my house. So on your way, you're holding your prize paper you wrote and printed out. You're holding it high in the air like, yes, look at this thing. This thing's amazing. While the whole time it's getting rained on and soaking wet from your house to my house. By the time you get to my house, you have this amazing content on paper that you show me, but I'm looking at it and I'm trying to hold the paper, but yet it's falling apart in my hand. And I'm like trying to make out the words. Is this an E or is this a C? The ink's running everywhere. It's totally like washed out. It's crumbling apart. There's really nothing there. I'm trying to make out the words. I'm holding the pieces of the paper together, trying to like, well, is this part of the page? Let's go here, let's go there. And I'm really trying very, very hard to make out what your content is. That is what it's like when you deliver great content with bad audio. So even though your content is amazing, The delivery method of how you get that content to your listener is just equally important. You would not have a piece of paper holding it high in the air, walking 2 blocks in a pouring rainstorm. I know that. You wouldn't do that. That's the point. Just like I cannot believe if you have great content that you would record it and put it out there and have it sound like garbage. It's the same thing as if walking that essay in your hand in a rainstorm and delivering and turning it in, having it fall apart in your hand on the other end. That's exactly what it's like when you have bad audio. Now, I know it does not have to sound like it was recorded in a total radio station sound booth with the best gear in the entire world. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about making sure that your audio is loud and clean and clear so that the person listening can understand it and hear it without having to strain to understand what they're saying. So if you have multiple people on the same recording, whether it's you and a guest, you and a co-host, try to make sure that both of the audio levels sound about the same. So you don't have to go up to one, down to the other, up to, playing with the volume knob, like one's quiet, one's loud. Make them about the same level so that the listener, like when they listen to your show, all they want to do is press play, put their device away, and never have to play with the volume knob again. And they can enjoy your show in one session. So it goes from one segment to the next. The volume does not change. One person to the next. The volume does not change. Levelator will help you figure that out. It does a fairly good job of leveling the audio. It does help, though, if you get the levels for each person kind of the same to start with, and then like to polish it off by running it through Levelator, give it nice balance to the audio so it all sounds amazing and all sounds great. And also on top of that, you also want to make sure that one person doesn't sound incredibly bad versus the other person. What I mean by that is like maybe somebody has a really good microphone and a really good setup, and the other person is coming on a walkie-talkie or something with that squelchy sound, I mean, do your best to kind of like balance the two sounds together so it doesn't too harsh. Really what you're trying to do is make the listening experience for your listener very enjoyable, very easy to understand, and something that you would be extremely proud of listening to yourself. So just the other day, I was on Twitter. Like I'm usually always on Twitter for the most part. You can find me at Podtastic A, and I'm sure there's a link to it in my show notes, and there's always a link to it on my website. But anyways, I was on Twitter. It got me thinking, you know what? Everybody has their reason why they want to start a podcast, and everybody has their reason why they podcast or do what they do. And I'm talking mostly to the independent podcasters, the indie shows, really, because the independent podcaster like myself and others aren't usually doing it from the business mindset. Like, oh, I'm doing this to create money, or I want to steer people to my course, or I'm trying to do this to sell this one thing, or I own this company, I'm trying to sell this to get you there, that sort of thing. Now, I know with the indie podcasters like us, our why for doing it really falls into 4 different categories. So I put up a poll on Twitter. Now, by the way, I love doing Twitter polls, and I suggest that anybody who has a Twitter account should probably throw out a few Twitter polls now and then to kind of gauge what you're talking about and trying to get an audience feedback, or any kind of feedback is always good. We'll get more into that later. But the post read as this. It says, "Why do you podcast?" A simple question with not so simple answers. What's your why? And the poll, I put up 4 choices. The 4 choices are this: you're teaching a topic, you have an opinion piece, interview VIP people, or have fun with friends. So those are basically, I think, the 4 reasons why anybody would want a podcast. Either you're teaching something, you have an opinion on something, you like to interview VIP people, or you're just having fun with friends. Now, for me, when I started the Chris and Christine show originally, my why, I would have to say, was having fun with friends. That was the reason I started the show in the first place. I think I want to have fun with Christine. Let's see if we can do this. Let's create something that's fun, that we can listen back and laugh and have a good time, maybe share with our friends, and they can listen, have a good time, and have fun. That's the reason why I started that show. Now, the reason why I started this show was to teach you how we had fun creating and how we made it happen so that you can also do the same thing and have fun and make an exciting and wonderful sounding podcast for your show. Okay, so with 70 votes coming in first place with 58% was having fun with friends. Now, I have to say this is the number one answer with 58% of the vote. That's quite a bit. Most of you said having fun. And I think having fun is a very, very important reason to podcast, because if you're not having any fun, then what's the point, really? So as we go down the list, people said was the very next thing people voted on was at 23% of the vote was teaching a topic. Like, here we are. I'm teaching you about podcasting. Maybe you're teaching people about stories. Maybe you're teaching whatever it possibly can be. If you're sharing something on your podcast in an educational way, no matter what it is, even a true crime can be a teaching podcast because you're teaching us about an event that happened we didn't know about. You're teaching it to us. That would fall under teaching at 23%. The very next thing has at 10%, getting down there, 10% was opinion piece. Now, an opinion piece, I would say, would be something like a movie review, maybe, or you're giving your opinion on something, whether it's a music, a book. Usually you say movies and TV would probably fall into this category. You're giving your opinion on said thing. That would be an opinion piece. And coming in dead last with only 9% of the vote, people say interview VIP people. So interviewing really, I thought, would be number one or close to number one, but it was in dead last. So basically you're saying that interviewing VIP people is not your concern. It's not your reason why you would start a podcast. So is it really that important to have VIP guests on your show? I know it's fun and all to have a VIP guest on your show. It's nice talking to people. Trust me, I love having guests on the show. I've got a guest booked for the next episode. So I mean, I love talking to people, but it's not the only reason I create a podcast. You don't have to have an interview. Like I said before, just because you have a podcast does not mean you have to have guests on your show. You can do a solo show or a co-host show. Guests sometimes can be overrated. And I've had some boring guests come on the Chris and Christine show. We've had them. And I've put them out there. And I'm like, gosh, they weren't very exciting, but I'll put them out there. That's why it's so important when we do have our Chris and Christine show podcast, is that when we did have a guest on the show, that we would talk about something else prior to bringing the guest in. You got to deliver value. It's always about delivering value to your audience. They are the ones that are the most important to your podcast, the ones that actually listen to it. So deliver value. Always be trying to help out others, and don't be thinking what's in it for me. No, it's what's in it for your audience. With, 2 million, 3 million, 4 million podcasts that are out there today, there's lots of choices, and it gets even bigger if you're on YouTube. Have you looked at how many active YouTube channels there are right now? Gosh, I think it's like is it billion yet? I don't know if it's quite in the billion. Maybe it is, but it is quite a lot. So it's very hard to stand out in the crowd. So if you're doing a podcast, let's just say, for example, that you have a movie review podcast, right? You're going to watch movies and review and discuss. Well, you know what? There is a lot, and I mean a lot, of movie and TV review shows out there. I would say, especially since the pandemic happened and a lot of people are at home watching Netflix, watching whatever is on streaming, Disney Plus, you name it, all that stuff. So they would make a podcast based on those things. That really is basing it on a topic. The topic is the movie that you're discussing that week. So you need to ask yourself, what makes your podcast different than the other guy's podcast that's also doing the exact same movie, doing the exact same breakdown and the exact same review? What makes yours different than theirs and the next guy and the next guy? That's really what you got to figure out. And I know it's hard. It's not easy to figure this out, but you really got to think about what makes your show different, because being different than the crowd is going to make you stand out. Now, whatever that is, that's up to you, but you really got to figure out a way to be completely different, especially if you're doing a review type of show. A lot of these review shows I've heard, they just basically will run down the plot line, talk about what happens, talk about the actors. Oh, I liked it too. I liked it too. It's great. Oh, so and so was the actor. So and so did this. So and so did that. And I think this, I think that. That's all fun and all, but you really have to figure out a way to make sure that that sounds different than all the other movie review shows out there. Now, you want to point the finger at me? Yeah. Well, this podcast is about podcasting. And I know there's about 100 different other podcast shows that are out there. I know because I subscribe to them and I listen to them. And I know what they're doing, and maybe they listen to my show. I don't know, but I try to make this show very personal and very engaging. And I tell you things that will help you create a podcast without having tons and tons of money on gear and equipment that you probably don't even need, or courses that you don't even need, and things you don't even need to do. You can make a fantastic podcast today. And I'm telling you the things that have worked for us and things that have not worked. I'm very honest with you. I keep it very real. I don't lie to you. That is one thing that really infuriates me more than anything else, is when a podcaster, or let's just say anybody really, but I'm talking about podcasters here, is when they lie to their audience. I don't lie to anybody. It makes me so mad when I see somebody being dishonest, whether it be on social media or with their listeners or whatever. That infuriates me more than anything, because trust is everything. Your listener is trusting you with their time. They're giving you one of the most precious things they have is their time. Don't lie to them and BS them and be dishonest to them and try to steal from them. Don't do that. Just embrace who you are and what you do. Be proud. You are you. You are special. You are the common denominator with your podcast. You is what makes your podcast so special. Speaking of special and speaking of honesty, you know what? I just decided the other day that for a limited time only, I will personally listen to your podcast and give you a quick review of it. If you want my free advice and free review, if you want me to listen to your show, somebody other than mom to listen to your show, then there's a link to that form in the show notes of this episode. You click on the form. It's a very easy form. It basically asks you the name of your show, your email, what kind of show is it, genre, just simple stuff. It takes like 1 second. Fill it out. I will listen to your most recent episode, and then I'll give you my thoughts. Very easy, for free. Now, I'm only going to do this for a limited time because I cannot be listening to a million different shows. I ain't going to have time in the week to do that. So for a limited time, I will listen to podcasts and give you my review of your show. Now, the reason why I'm doing this is because I just want to help. I want to help you be better. I want to listen to your show and hear it and experience it. And maybe if there's things we can improve on, I'll tell you about it. Otherwise, it may sound great and it may be a fantastic show. I don't know. I won't know until I hear it. So please share with me your podcast. So I want to say thank you so much for joining me here at Podtastic Audio. You can find out every single thing you want to know Podtastic Audio at podtasticaudio.com, and links to all that will be in the show notes of this episode. And on Podtastic Audio, there is a special page on there, podtasticaudio.com/easy, where I will personally help you or anybody make their own podcast for them without even having to press record. What? How do I do that? Well, it's all about the magic of podcasting, baby. I will record everything right here in the K2 studios for you. You will join with your very own K2 Studios session pass to get access to the recording booth, as it were. Basically, it's all done remotely. So don't you worry about a thing. That's how I record all my clients, and that's how I take care of them all at podtasticaudio.com/easy. If you know anybody or any business that would love to create a podcast for their company and they don't want to waste time figuring out how to record and edit and all that junk, I will take care of it for them. Easy peasy. That's why I call it easy. And if you found any value from this podcast or this episode, please share it with somebody. You can easily do that from whatever device you're using. There's always a share button built into every single podcast player. And if you want to, but it's not required, if you would like, you could review this podcast on whichever platform you want. It does not have to be 5-star. Don't even worry about that. I just would rather have you give me an honest review. It doesn't have to be 5-star. Any review you want, as long as it's honest, and I will take it. I appreciate you listening. Thank you so much, and you keep on making your fantastic podcast with your amazing audio, and I'll catch you next time.